Boy, are they a thing these days. We definitely need that brilliant line. They are a thing these days. But anyway, um, they one of the things I learned recently is that AI interviews, intelligence interviews, have been around for quite a while. I really thought they were new when we started seeing all this AI about 3 years ago, ChatGPT and the others. I think we're going to see a lot more AI interviews and that sort of thing. And I'm really excited to be sharing some of this information with you. Now, I have 45 minutes. I am not going to tell you everything about AI interviews. And also what I'm talking about is really platform neutral. I am not talking about HireVue or Master Interview or any one platform. The information I'm giving you today pretty much goes for all of them. But if you have an interview with that's being the platform is a particular company, go look them up. They'll give you some details that you might want to know. So, um, okay, why aren't my slides going? Go somewhere, slide. Okay. I always like to start interview talks with good news. One thing a lot of people don't know, you may know, is that a piece of good news is that the employer already thinks you're qualified before they ever call you in. They're calling you in online or wherever on the phone or whatever. What they're want to find out is whether the application materials, your LinkedIn, whatever it is you've told them about you is in fact what they think they know about you. So that is important. You are already on the plus side. It is not, you hear a lot about people saying you've got to go sell yourself. And what I'm here to tell you is, of course, you need to talk about your attributes and let people know, but people who are interviewing you and non-people, the assumption there is you're qualified. Another thing is there are some similarities between AI interviews and interviews with people. Um, One of them is that interviews are two-way. Now, of course, interviews with a person is much more two-way than interviews with an avatar or a robot or a screen. However, you can take a look at what kind of questions they're asking, how are they, what seems to be their attitude, etc. Very little compared to an interpersonal interview, but indeed there are some clues. Another thing that I find good news, if you're in a job hunt and interviewing and preparing for interviews, a number of the questions are similar. They ask you the same stuff. It's just an avatar asking you rather than a person interviewing you. And obviously, you can't read body language. You can't really assess how that being or non-being avatar is responding to you the way you would. But you do the questions are similar and the answers are probably similar. One of the best things I learned about ChatGPT AI interviews is that there are really good ways to practice. So, okay, so let's start. We'll start today with what are AI interviews? Um, why are recruiters and hiring people using them? How can that lady just said that you can prepare and practice, etc. How do you do that? How do you present your best with your look and your lighting and your voice, etc., when you're in an AI interview? And also, at the end, I'm going to share with you what kind of information employers get from AI interviews. How many of you have been on an AI interview? Can just, show of hands or give me a thumbs up or can't see. But anyway, all right.
Looks like a few, quite a few.
Okay. I would venture a guess if you're in an active job search, that is likely you will encounter an AI interview. And I do believe it's going to grow. Why are there AI interviews? One, we have the technology, of course, but another thing is, and you may have heard about it or read about it, employers, people finding talent, recruiters have have now get a tsunami of applications. Some are relevant, some aren't. Some are the right, for the right job. The other is, we're hiring for this, and somebody with a history of dog catching is sending their resume, but it's a management problem. And so they need a way, they still want the best person for the job, but they need a way to streamline, they need to save people hours in the hiring process. Another thing is it standardizes assessments. Everybody who's being interviewed for this particular job is going to be asked the same questions, and that's it. And the other thing is it's a data-based approach. Rightly or wrongly, it is. From what I understand, and this may change, the final decisions are still made by human being, people breathing, etc. I don't know that that's always going to be the case, but it is now. A few more things to know about your AI interviews. It's not pass or fail. It's not if you say the wrong word. It's like when you're a comic on stage and they take the hook and take you off if you answer the question wrong. It is not. It's really things are ranges and scales and that sort of thing. What do they evaluate? Again, this is with a robot or on tape, on a recording or something like that. Your verbal communication, your job-related keywords, preparation, what you say, um, and behavioral questions when they ask you, tell me about a time when, or this or that, so that they can get a sense, the employers who are asking the questions can get a sense of teamwork, your teamwork, your leadership skills, your communication skills, and such. So you're telling stories that show that you have these competencies and capabilities. They absolutely don't evaluate how likable you are, and that's the difference between in-person interviews. They may or may not say it, but of course they're looking to see if you can get along with people. They're not looking at emotions or personality. Don't know if you start crying in the interview, what'll happen. I don't know, but they're not looking for that. And then physical traits, they're not looking for that. Always remember in an AI interview, the whole thing is based on algorithms.
Excuse me,
Uh,
Anne.
sure, you have a question?
We do, and you might be about to answer that. Is database approach, are they looking for ATS keywords during these interviews?
Yeah, keywords are important from the job description and that sort of thing. And also industry words. If you're in a particular industry and they refer to something a certain way, yes,
And is there
yes.
a pattern for one industry that uses more AI than interviews than another?
That I don't know. I can tell you that AI interviews are often used for great big hires, like we need a zillion people by Tuesday, like a McDonald's or a hotel opening. And when they just need to do these interviews really, really fast. Um, I think, yeah, and also a lower skill level. I'm not saying when you work in a hotel you have a low skill level, but it's a lower skill level than you are a programmer or taking care of security for somebody or that kind of thing. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to let you keep going because we do have a bunch of more questions, but I know
All
you want to
right.
get
I'll
to
do
your
the
last
best I
question.
can, and I've given you my
Yes.
email address. You can send me questions because 45 minutes is short.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, there are legal concerns. There are concerns about data transparency. Say you interview for a job and you don't get that job. Where the heck does your data go from your interview? I don't know. And they don't share. Another is a concern about racial discrimination and biases against people with disabilities. Can a person with particular disabilities succeed in this kind of an interview process? It really does depend. If someone is neurotypical or is blind or whatever, those things might make this very difficult. I don't know. Um, It is true that many states and regions are looking into this. There are rules out there in some states, and I suggest to you that you look up what your state or jurisdiction says about using AI interviews, because there are places that they don't let them be used, or you can't show faces and that kind of stuff. So my suggestion is talk to Dr. Google or whoever you use to try and find out what's going on where you are. One of the other things is I think people hear a lot about, well, maybe it's just me. I hear a lot about people cheating on their AI interview. You know, they sit there and their phone is right in front of their screen and they're just reading off. You know, the avatar can't see your phone. Well, they've gotten wise to some of that, and they're looking specifically for things like, is this applicant getting help from another person off camera? Is someone whispering? Is someone reading from notes? Now, as an interview coach, I would say, yes, you can have notes. What you can't do is read the first American novel from your notes. Okay. You can have notes for a cue, but don't read a script. Don't write a script. Okay. Also, are you looking for, I used to have a coworker who had 4 screens open at once. That always seemed really confusing to me. But anyway, so if they're seeing him look all the way across here, they would probably, the tool would probably guess that person is cheating. Another thing they're looking for that they can sense, I realize that's a human term, but they can sense that someone's pasting answers from another tool, from another, I almost said piece of paper. You know, I didn't mean that. Anyway, also, are you looking at, you're looking at your phone, your iPad, whatever. So I think when this started, there was just one camera and this is that what they recorded, but the spectrum of what they're looking for to keep applicants from from cheating, is growing. And so be aware of that. As I say, I keep seeing articles or things with people with their phone in front of, but I couldn't find a picture of one to show you. So, um, okay. I would be remiss. I think I missed something here. Did I define algorithms for you? I don't think I did.
No.
No, I think I skipped that. I'm sorry. All right. Excuse me. Rewind your mind, if you would. I would like to, before we go further, talk about what artificial intelligence interviews are. How did I miss this slide? Very important. Basically, these interviews use our artificial intelligence in the form of an avatar or a this or that to evaluate your answers, how you appear, um, and they evaluate it and assess it in light of a job. They analyze speech patterns and voice tone, the language you use, and I assume you're not cursing on screen, but more that different industries, different companies, et cetera, have different industries, different career fields have languages they use. And this is something we've been teaching the feds, and some of you could be feds, and that is that if you're talking to a business about what you've done, you need to talk with business terminology. And in a presentation I gave for JCA, I made a chart of how do government people talk about the same thing, like mission, how do they talk about that in business? So that's worth noting if you're a career changer. Important is that you're talking to avatars and they are using algorithms. I could have called this the AAA talk. Avatars, this is important with respect to bias, are created by experts who define what AI interviews should look for, gather examples of what they consider strong responses. They translate that into patterns and into step-by-step rules for your AI interview platform to follow. And then the platform is trained and tested with real data so they can apply these rules consistently during interviews. Remember what I said about bias. So your AI platforms say no bias. I'm here to say somebody wrote this stuff. Someone, a human being, decided what they were going to do, and it maybe did introduce bias. And that's one of the things that companies and governments are taking a look at. So I apologize for the confusion there. Um, okay. Uh, if you've ever seen me talk before about interviews, you've heard me say that preparation is absolutely essential. It's essential in in-person interviews, and I would say maybe more essential in AI interviews. Uh, One of the things that's good or bad is that questions are often like the ones you've seen before. If you're interviewing or if you've read about interviews, you've seen these guys before. I started teaching this decades ago, and they were still asking some of these questions. It's kind of, you wonder. Anyway, questions like, well, this is a good one for anyone, but tell me about yourself, or one form of that or another. Why do you want this job? Strengths and what are your strengths and weaknesses? That one's been around forever. Also, more and more we're seeing behavioral questions. Those are the ones that they ask you, you know, um, tell me about a time that you didn't get along with a colleague. Tell me about a time that you missed a deadline. Tell me about a time, whatever, that the computer with all your source material crashed and burned, and you had to put together 500-page binders by printing out the papers. I might add that that was true. Anyway, that was true for me. So they also will ask if you have questions for them. So you can do a little predicting about what they might ask you, but know that some of these, if you will, tried and true questions are likely to appear. Of course, you're going to infuse your answers with what you've done and your industry, etc. But these are questions to start thinking about if you're in doing this kind of an interview. And also, if you've ever seen me before, you know that I really stress the importance of telling stories during your interviews. I'm not talking about bedroom stories, you know that. I'm talking about planning stories that talk about what you did, what was a success, what illustrates your leadership capability and stuff like that. The reason I stress this, and for those of you who are old enough to know Joe Friday, he's the guy who said just the facts, ma'am, on TV. Stories are remembered up to 22 times more than facts. So doesn't that mean you might want to include a few in your next interview? So if you really want to explore this more, I have a little URL down there that you can take a look at the article about this. But there are many, but this is my favorite. Another thing, again, remember I said people write these interviews for platforms. What I've heard in almost every uh, workshop I've gone to or things I've read is that AI interviews like STAR. And STAR, some of you may have heard of before, is an approach that career people teach. It's not the only one that career people teach that helps you structure your answer. By the way, Anne, can you put the link to the handouts in the text?
I did, and I can do it again for
Oh,
you. We
okay.
are we are having problems opening up one of the star files.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Do you know?
so
Okay. All right. I'll try and talk through it. Um, I will talk through it, and then you all will get it. Um, let's say, do we have trusty paper here just in case of technical failure? Yes, we do. Anyway, uh, so we suggested to job seekers that they write up something that talks about the situation, the task, the action they took, and the result. And that is what happened or why did you have to do something? What were you responsible for in that situation? What did you do? And what happened as a result? That is the STAR approach. Um, Recommended, this is a data processing program. So it is particularly important for an AI interview for you to include things like numbers and timeframes and dates and percentages and comparisons, et cetera, measurable outcomes. If you can think of that little robot sucking up the data while you give it, the more the better. This is the sort of thing they're looking for. Another thing is there seems to be a trend in resume writing, and I know we're talking about interviews, seems to be a trend in resume writing not to include your technical stuff, um, the tools you know how to use, Salesforce, for example. And I suggest to you in all of your job search to remember to talk about it, even if it's sort of the lower level, you're not programming fancy machines, but even it's the Google suite or the, Microsoft suite, that kind of stuff. Good idea to include it. But again, remember, this system's, licking its chops, waiting for you to as I turn that into a people reference, waiting for you to give it data to swallow. Okay, so when you're trying to decide what stories to do, you want stories that demonstrate your skills. That's another thing that's a trend in the job market. We used to be, and when I was earlier in my career, people were getting hired for being a generalist, kind of good at a lot of things. And skills have really overtaken that. And that is something to remember as you're telling about yourself in an AI interview. Um, you want stories that are showing that you learned something, that you grew, that you had resilience, what you contributed, what were the outcomes. We saved money, we beat the deadline, we made the budget, we cut the budgets by 20% and still finished on time. And another one of these tools, like Star, is adds the idea that at the end of your story, that you tie it back to the job you're talking about. So, for example, if you're talking about a marketing campaign, you might say something like, "I think this project was very similar to the ones that are referred to in the job description," or something like that. So you can tie it back even when you're talking to an avatar. So also, when you do stories, I suggest you do them for your strengths and weaknesses questions, because those are really answering the what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses is very difficult if you're doing it on the spot. I would refer to it as tap dancing. And and that's not what you want to do. You want to think ahead of time about what it is you're going to say about your strengths when you're talking to somebody about this particular job. And again, about your weaknesses that aren't going to say, "Well, I have this weakness that would make me a complete failure in this situation." Obviously, you're not going to do that. But good idea when you're talking about weaknesses, talking about something you learned, something that was hard for you and you figured out how to do it. So now you're wonderful. Again, and I've mentioned this before, is to use the language that shows you know about the business or industry that you want to work in. And that might be a pivot if you're coming from a very different and you're doing a career shift or a career change, whatever. It's a good idea to remember language. It's powerful. Questions here?
Yes, we
Okay, this
do
is one
have,
of the handouts.
yes, Joe, Anne, yes, we do have questions. I was just responding
Okay.
to Evan. He had a great idea about renaming the file, which I just did. And I'm going to be attaching it to the chat and sending it. So we were able to open it up, which is great. So thank you for that help there. And for the questions we have, how much time does a human being use to evaluate an AI interview? Do you know?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, they're wondering if a human being then looks at the AI interview, or is it the
Oh,
AI
yeah,
that
yeah,
makes the
yeah.
decision?
Absolutely. They pay for this.
Okay.
They
Um,
pay for it. They basically on the front end, a human being is saying, "We want these questions. We want to study these things. We want to know that the person used a bunch of keywords," that kind of thing.
okay, so the AI summarizes then and they review the
Right.
summary.
They give
Gotcha.
you data, you know, sort of succinct data language in a report.
Okay.
And they
And
do
some of
read
the,
them. They do read them. And some of them, I started looking for an example of what does one look like? What does one of these reports look like? And um, I found some that were a page, like a score sheet. scorecard,
Right.
and I found another one that was 10 pages long. So, which
Wow.
kind of overwhelmed me uh in a way. So, uh
Okay.
okay, another one.
Um, yes, absolutely. Let me get back to the questions. Do we need to appear as much as an avatar as possible to best communicate with an avatar? I don't know if
I
they
would go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say no, you're the person, they're the avatar. Everybody should stay in their own lane. So,
Yeah. And I thought that was meant for humor, but I thought, somebody might also think otherwise. And I've heard a
no,
lot of
that's
different.
fine. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't think, I think we think of avatars as being moving stiffly and weirdly and all that stuff. No, we totally don't want you to do that. They are looking at your movements and your uhs and ums and that kind of thing. And it's very hard sort of not to anthropomorphize and kind of make it sound like a person, but
Mhm.
it is a machine. It is an algorithm that you are talking to and trying to, but a report will go to a human being.
Okay. And
Okay.
someone asked, they've heard a lot of different approaches to the question, and they provided different responses. Tell me about yourself. What is your recommended approach? And I just wanted to ask you one more question about what you just said, because someone said if they normally stare off to their other computer to look for their star answers or their answers, is the AI going to think they're cheating?
Yep. I would
Oh,
imagine they would. I think you need to be looking at your screen. And because if I go and start reading my handouts over here, and they are over here, but if I start doing that in an interview for more than a second to look at the highlights or the bullet points, that's going to be a red
mhm.
flag.
Okay.
That's going to, did I answer the other question? I think I did. So, um,
So
but
someone asked,
as, huh? Go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, someone asked, says, how do you answer the question? Tell me about yourself. What's your recommended approach?
Talk about I could take the next hour to talk about that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to refer you back to um, a regular interview workshop. It's exactly the same. Tell me about yourself. You want to be talking about your relevant experience. How did you get started? Why do you want this job? Okay. I was recently talking to somebody who said, I tell people not to necessarily think of it as tell me about yourself, but rather than why I think I'm right for this job. And
Mhm.
that's kind of a different formulation because ever since I was in elementary school, I liked to teach people. People did not respond to that fondly in those days, but anyway, the so I have wanted to, I used to take apart the toaster at home, so that's why I knew I wanted to be an engineer. Uh, talk about a little bit about the background, talk about your relevant experience, and talk about the things that are most compelling about why you think you should get this job. And you're not talking about it that way, but that's what I'm hoping you're thinking about. But as I say, I could go on for hours.
And,
Uh,
and may I ask you a question that pertains to your legal slide? Um, are they legally required to tell you in advance that you are about to experience an AI interview versus a human?
I don't know about the legality of it, but the system might even invite you. So I don't think you're going to be in a situation where you don't know.
Hmm.
You don't know. But yes, it's sort of like when you're invited to a Zoom meeting. It's a Zoom meeting. You're not going, you're not leaving your office um, there's no mistake about it, is my understanding.
Okay.
So and that's where if you have a disability or you have a compelling reason to say, well, this might not work for me, um, that's when that's going to come up. There's probably a recruiter behind the situation or
Hmm.
whatever.
And
Okay.
last question before you go on. There still comes some confusion as to why it would be considered cheating if I look over to the right or to the left to see a different monitor for my answers.
This is my understanding about how, I am not the end all be all truth, but my understanding, is that the platforms more and more are focusing on cheating and trying to prevent it. And
Yeah.
one of the things they look for is, are you looking over here and answering from the, out of the side of your mouth, whatever. So I'm not saying it's bad, but what I'm saying is they're looking for that. That is a red flag. Not all of them, but you're not going to know whether the platform is you're not going to know how the platform is assessing this. They're not going to say to you, this is how we figure out whether or not you're cheating. So I'm just giving you some of the options. But I'd say that you can look at a note, you could do that. But if you start in reading your answer, your well-prepared answer that Ann Poritzky told you you ought to have, that's not a good idea.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer the question?
Yep, I think so. Thank you.
Okay. So on your screen is a just an example about how to do a star story. That's not my focus today, except I want you to know how to do it. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background here on what you do. And I have a blank form like this. And when Anne shares when she shares the handouts with you, or if you have them now, you can see this. So basically, you don't have to use this form. The idea is to think about these things when you're creating your story. Different sources say different things. Should you develop 7 stories, 10 stories? I don't think you need 20 stories. Focus on some, don't memorize, but this is what you do. So let's talk about a interview where one of their focuses is collaboration. So you give yourself a brief overview of what you did and what you're going to be talking about. Uh, and then fill in these boxes. What was the situation? What was the task? What were the actions you took? What were the results? Now, this isn't a resume, although you can use this tool for a resume, but then you can develop a story. And essentially, this is a story all made up. So don't ask me where I got it from. I got it from my brain. I led a high visibility marketing project involving 3 departments with a tight 10-week budget, a deadline, and a limited budget and high leadership expectations. I don't think I really talk like that, but I did that day. My role was to align all the teams on messaging, milestones, and deliverables. So I coordinated meetings. I found money to fill the gaps of the funding shortages. I started using a project management system, etc. So the result, the stunning accomplishment: administrative workload dropped by 30%, status update emails decreased by 40%. See all these percentages. One-time task completion increased from 72 to 95%, and we got a complete consensus on messaging ahead of schedule and delivered the launch on time with strong interdepartment buy-in. So that is kind of a star story, which sounds stilted because I wrote it that way, but that's kind of what you're looking for. And I also recommend the tieback, which says, I believe this project was very similar to the kind of work described in the job description. So I did blah, 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 blah. And I think you can see from what I've told you that's the kind of thing you want. That's what you're hiring for. Okay. So I'm not much time on this because you have it in your handout and you can send me an email. Um, so I've given you a blank
And
one as
can I just
Mhm.
say something because I'm reading some of the comments in the chat. This is Jody,
Sure.
and some people are feeling a little disheartened and feeling a little kind of like they're questioning. They're just feeling that this is kind of a blow.
Oh
And
no.
so if can you address that because that's a big concern. I'm looking in the chat and there's several comments like that, and I don't want people to walk
No.
away feeling
No,
disheartened and
I don't
yeah.
want you to be unhappy. Um,
So maybe address how some of those, yeah, address their concerns.
yeah.
Okay.
Let me say this. Um, I don't really like this either. However, I think it is doable and I think it's coming. And so the only, well, and there's another piece of good news, and that is that there are many platforms that you can practice on. And you always can say, I'm going to do one of those interviews. Forget it. If you want me, I'm not doing it. But sadly, if that's the way they're hiring, that's the way they're hiring. And so my message that I'm hoping is coming through is, yeah, I think it's awful. I don't want to talk to an avatar when I'm trying to get a job. I completely agree with you. On the other hand, time marches on. AI is all over the place. We may not like it, but it is. So your only defense is a good offense, and that is in my concern or my opinion is being ready, knowing how to do it. And I have a list. One of the handouts is a list of platforms you can use to practice. You can practice with friends, and that sort of thing. I don't think I did what you asked me to do, did I, Jody?
No, I know. The thing is, unfortunately, AI, fortunately and unfortunately, AI is here to stay. And that's why
Right,
we offer, our cyber savvy course. And that's, because we can fight it kicking and screaming.
right.
Now, generally, I mean, we're not saying every employer is doing AI
Oh,
interviews. So
no, no,
we
no.
don't want, we don't, I still, running the Career Gateway, I would say, still 90%, 90 or 95 or even doing, still people to people interviews. So this is not, don't feel that every interview is going to be AI. What we're trying to do is to show you other, other, you know, uh, how all the platforms that your interview can be presented, and for you to be prepared.
Right.
5 years
That's my
ago, 5 years ago, virtual interviewing was nil. I mean, you had in-person interviewing. Then COVID hit, and then we had a pivot, and people were feeling uncomfortable in this virtual realm. And now we've kind of embraced it because we've had to. And so that's all that we're saying. That this is not the wave of the future. Not it's still the majority of people interviewing you will be either virtual or be like a person to person interview, but we just want you to be prepared
Right.
for any type of interview. And so that's why we're presenting this, and that's why Anne is presenting this.
Right. I couldn't agree more. That is exactly. Do I like this? Not particularly. Seems awful. I did a couple, I gave you some practice platforms, and I got in the middle of an answer of one I went, I don't know how to answer this question, and turned it off and started over. All I can say to you is my view on this is forewarned is forearmed.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't necessarily, you go to a regular interview, we would tell you try and get some rapport with the interviewer, try to get to know the interview and what's important to them, what's not important. Well, guess what? If it's an avatar, you're not going to be able to do that. You can guess some things based on the objectives of the job and the organization, but we can't make it go away.
And
And
again, if it makes you uncomfortable and you're like, I don't want to do it, then you have that power, you have that choice, and you do not have
yeah,
to interview with them. That is definitely
right.
your
You
power.
have that choice.
Right.
I would say to you that not right now necessarily, but there may be a time that that'll be a deal breaker. I think more and more you're going to see screening interviews this way, rather than chatting on the phone with the recruiter, perhaps, or the HR person. This is the kind of thing because those aren't as much, those are basically, are you qualified interviews?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, and the other thing is, I was not able to find it for this presentation, but I did see an article pass through my consciousness that said some employers are rethinking this whole thing about AI interviews. But all I need you to know is that they are there, and you may encounter one for a job you really want. And it's like if somebody asks you a question that you don't like in an interview, you have two choices. You can say, "Well, I'm turning off this interview. If you would ask me a question like that, I never want to work with you ever," and storm out the door. And I would never advise you do that. I advise that you stay to the end. First of all, if they're awful, you've wasted good money for them. But also every interview is a learning experience. And the cool part of these interviews is that there are I have a page and a half full of platforms where you can practice. Some are free, some are not, etc. So it's like any new skill. It's like any new skill, but I don't want you to think that because I'm talking about this, I think it's the wonderful idea, the cat's meow, etc. I don't. I hate it. But I want you to be ready.
Right.
So
Knowledge, as we say in the Career Gateway, knowledge is power.
now
And we are
knowledge is power.
and by participating in these expos, hearing the workshops, participating in the Career Gateway, you are taking back that power and over your
Right.
own job search. And so, we
Right.
we can't hide our head in the sand. We've got to be prepared.
Especially as 50 plus workers, because then
Mhm.
there they go thinking you're too old to cope, you're too old to fit in, etc. Okay, I don't have a lot of time left, so I wanted to scoot through the last things I wanted to say, but you will have the slides and you have my email. And if I were in charge of this, I wouldn't do it, but that's about of AI interviewing in the world. But it's tough. Anyway, so another thing you need to do to get ready for your interview is to prepare how you look, what the background looks like. I like to tell the story of I was coaching a young man for a Zoom interview, and the door behind his head when I was coaching him was filled with sweatshirts hung in various looks of disarray. And I said to him, I think you should clear that out. Look at what it is, he said, "Oh, I can put them on the floor." I love this. I have young men as kids or as young adults. Anyway, so be practical. Anybody who knows me knows that I've spent the entire pandemic up until now trying to figure out lighting. I have different ring lights and this light and that light, it's worth it though. You can try and figure out the lighting that'll work for you. Also, I don't think you can use virtual backgrounds in an AI interview, but I don't know that for a fact. Okay, so this is my dress for an interview. Obviously, I want you to laugh. This is not what you want your interviewer to see. You want to show good posture. The other thing is to have your camera at eye level, and a lot of times people don't think of that. Because your interviewer is that avatar, and what someone's going to see if they see recordings of the interview are going to see you, and you want you to look like you're looking at them. Okay, so you can read these later. This is about trying to look relaxed. And I said, test this, see how you look in the camera. Another interviewing tip is to sit at the front of your chair so you don't even risk looking slouchy or using a desk. Again, you can use test Zooms to do this. And again, I'm trying to be funny here. I don't think you would want to look like this guy in the top left. I also spent a lot of time with how do I avoid glare in my glasses? I can't read the computer when I wear contacts, so I don't have a choice. I have to wear glasses. And one hint is to have your lighting up above you or overhead. But again, in my experience, sometimes these glasses things work and sometimes they don't. So see what you can do, changing the position of your lighting, etc. I myself don't want to do this without glasses on, but that's a personal preference. Your voice, again, if you tend to be somebody that people tell you speak too low, too loud, too fast, too slow, um, try and take care of that. Try not to do that. Also, particularly if English is your second language, be careful about enunciating your words. And again, you can ask friends. You can ask friends, you can ask, career coach, career gateway colleagues, etc., to help you understand if you're understood the way you think you are. Okay. This is a really important tip, and that is that when I said you could practice, 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 it does vary by platform, but virtually all platforms give you time to read the question and time to respond. And this is something you can look up when you know what company you're dealing with. But you can have a timer right there on your cell phone, and also you can time yourself with answers. One of the bad things that makes me crazy, but I don't have any control, is there are most often, no retakes. Well, you got what you got. Okay, we already talked about most of this. Practice, practice. You can Zoom, voice notes, recordings, whatever. I've given you a handout about platforms. The one I've used and have heard about most about is Udly. All of them want to charge you. You might even take a subscription for a month or whatever. I checked all of these links, and when I checked them, which was not long ago, they all worked and they were what I thought they were. Okay, last but not least, what do you do if you have a tech fail? And they happen, of course. They happen to all of us. Important to stay calm. Do that old thing of logging out and logging in. Try and contact somebody. Contact the person that you were dealing with to schedule the interview. Just, make sure that they know that this blew up and you can't, you were not able to talk, you weren't able to be heard, et cetera, et cetera. So last but not least, and I have a handout about this, and they're about to give me the hook here. And that is, what are the reports? What do interviewers get when they get a report? So they usually get a transcript. They get timestamps on your answers. That goes back to practicing how long it takes to answer. If they allowed retakes, how'd that work? Again, how did you answer those behavioral questions? How did you deliver? What did you look like? Not your race or ethnicity, but rather your posture. Are you attentive? Are you looking at the camera, etc.? They also, they also might, they often will report on red flags or important notes. Maybe you really didn't answer that question, or you went wandering in another direction when they asked you a question and they asked you this. You see examples of this on the news with fair frequency. They asked you a question and the person answered something different. Remember, AI in AI interviews, the bots and the robots and the avatars do not make the decisions. And they do not analyze your emotions. They don't analyze how friendly you are and that sort of thing. So anyway, I think I'm out of time.
And I just want to mention that you can, and it wasn't saying that you can't use notes in an AI interview.
Oh, no, I'm not saying.
No, because some people were I'm looking in the chat. It's really, it's as much as you knew if you're doing a virtual interview, as much as you're using notes in that, you don't
Right.
want to be, you don't want to be searching the internet while, if you're doing an AI interview.
Absolutely. That's one thing they're looking for.
Yeah, you want, if you have some notes, that's fine. I mean, that's if you prepared for the interview and have some notes, that's perfectly okay. So yeah.
Yeah. So when I was talking to you today in this talk, I have notes in front of me. I don't think you can see them. I was going to show them to you, but nah, you can't see them. But anyway, these are just little cues to not forget to tell you this or that. Like, don't forget to tell you what an algorithm is, which I didn't follow. So, anyway, I know there's not much time for questions. I will stay on and answer questions in chat.
Oh, that's terrific.
I hope this was helpful to you, and I don't want you to think I am promoting AI interviews. I just want you to be damn good at it when it makes a difference for you.
Exactly. Thank you. And Ann Hap, do you want to tell Ann P where you are in the chat?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Anne. Thanks so much for being here today. We had probably more comments today than questions, and people were actually helping each other out in chat today, which was wonderful to see.
Mm-hmm.
There was really just one question that was left that we didn't get to, And that was at 10:47 a.m. And that was Peter's question. So if you could respond to Peter, that would be great. And Anne, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation today.
And if you have
Oh.
questions for Anne Poritzky and this informative and very thought-provoking discussion, Anne will be in chat. Address it directly to Anne Poritzky, and she will answer you back directly. So because we're going to have another terrific
Right, you have someone
yeah.
great